Thomas discovers a sealed envelope hidden inside his late father's vintage pocket watch. He expects a sentimental note, or perhaps a final word of advice. Instead, the faded ink reveals a transaction receipt and a confession so horrifying it will shatter 38 years of family history, exposing that the parents who raised him with love bought him from desperate strangers, and that somewhere in the world, his biological family received payment for a son they sold like property. The pocket watch felt heavier than it should. Thomas Barrett held it in his palm, turning it over slowly, watching afternoon light catch on the tarnished silver case. His father had carried this watch every single day for 40 years, checking it during business meetings, consulting it before dinner, winding it every morning with the same ritualistic precision he'd applied to everything in his life. Now Gerald Barrett was gone. 3 weeks dead from a heart attack that had struck without warning. One moment arguing about politics over Sunday breakfast, the next moment collapsed on the kitchen floor while Thomas's mother screamed for an ambulance that arrived too late. The funeral had been large. Gerald had been a successful attorney, well respected in their Virginia town, known for his integrity and his careful attention to detail. Hundreds of people had come to pay respects. Colleagues and clients and neighbors who all said the same thing. Your father was a good man, an honorable man, you must be so proud. Thomas was proud, had always been proud. Gerald Barrett had been tough but fair, demanding but loving. He'd pushed Thomas to excel in school, to go to law school like him, to build a career that mattered. He'd taught Thomas about honor and duty and the importance of doing what was right, even when it was hard. He'd been in every way that mattered, a good father. So why, Thomas wondered now, had he hidden something inside this watch? Something that required tools to access, required intention to conceal? Thomas sat in his father's study, the room that had always been off-limits during childhood, sacred space where Gerald worked on cases and read late into the night. It smelled like leather and old books, and the pipe tobacco Gerald had pretended to quit, but never actually stopped smoking. Everything was exactly as his father had left it. His mother couldn't bear to change anything yet. The watch had been left to Thomas specifically in the will. To my son Thomas I leave my father's pocket watch, which came to me from his father before him. May it serve you as well as it served us. Look inside for the truth when you're ready to understand. Look inside for the truth. The phrase had seemed poetic at first, meaningless lawyer language about legacy and time. But it had nagged at Thomas for 3 weeks. Look inside, not look at. Inside. He'd examined the watch carefully. The crystal was clean. The face showed no hidden messages. The hands moved smoothly, keeping perfect time even after all these years. But when he'd shaken it gently, he'd heard something. A soft rattle, something loose inside the mechanism. Thomas had taken it to a watchmaker that morning, an old man in a tiny shop downtown who'd known Gerald, who'd repaired this very watch a dozen times over the decades. There's something inside, the watchmaker had confirmed. Behind the movement, someone put it there deliberately, created a hollow space. Very careful work. Your father asked me to seal it 20 years ago, made me promise never to open it unless you brought it to me yourself. 20 years ago. Thomas had been 18 then, fresh out of high school, about to start college. He'd thought that was a strange time for his father to seal something away, but he'd asked the watchmaker to open it anyway. Inside, folded impossibly small, had been an envelope. Old paper, yellowed with age, sealed with wax that had cracked. On the front, in his father's precise handwriting, for Thomas, the truth about where you came from. Read only when I'm gone. I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry. Thomas had waited until now to open it. Had driven home, locked himself in his father's study, poured himself a glass of his father's whiskey and sat in his father's chair, trying to gather courage, trying to prepare himself for whatever revelation waited inside. But you couldn't prepare for this kind of thing. You could only face it. He broke the wax seal. It crumbled like ancient clay. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in his father's handwriting, and something else. A piece of paper that looked official, legal, like a contract or a receipt. Thomas read the receipt first because it was shorter, because it seemed less dangerous than the letter. It was dated March 15th, 1986, 38 years ago, 2 months before Thomas's supposed birthday. The header read, Private Adoption Services, Confidential Transaction Record. Below that, in cold official language, was a description that made Thomas's stomach turn. Received from Elena and Marcus Rodriguez, one male infant approximately 6 weeks old, healthy, unnamed. Consideration paid, $15,000. Transaction witnessed by Father Michael O'Connor, St. Mary's Church. Infant to be placed with Gerald and Patricia Barrett of Richmond, Virginia. All parties agree this transaction is final and confidential. Thomas read it again, then again. The words didn't change, didn't soften, didn't become less devastating. Received from. Consideration paid. Transaction. The language of a business deal. The language of buying property, not adopting a child. Buying one. His parents, Gerald and Patricia Barrett, had paid $15,000 for a baby. For him, they'd purchased him from people named Rodriguez like he was furniture or a car or livestock. Thomas's hands started shaking. The whiskey glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the hardwood floor. He didn't move to clean it up. Just sat there, frozen, staring at the receipt that rewrote his entire existence. He picked up the letter with numb fingers. His father's handwriting seemed to blur and swim on the page. He had to blink several times before he could focus enough to read. "My dearest Thomas, if you're reading this, I'm dead and you've found what I've hidden for so long. I've rehearsed this confession 1,000 times in my mind, searching for words that could make you understand, make you forgive. I never found them. There are no words that can justify what your mother and I did, but I can at least tell you the truth." Thomas forced himself to keep reading, even though every instinct screamed at him to burn the letter unread, to preserve his father's memory, to protect himself from whatever came next. "Your mother and I tried for years to have children, years of doctors and treatments and disappointments that carved holes in our marriage. By 1985, we'd exhausted every medical option. The adoption agencies told us the wait would be 5 to 7 years. We were already in our 40s. We were desperate. Desperation. That was the setup for every terrible decision, every rationalization, every choice that destroyed lives while claiming to save them. A colleague told me about a priest who helped arrange private adoptions, Father Michael O'Connor at St. Mary's. He worked with young mothers in crisis, helping them place babies with good Catholic families. It seemed like an answer to our prayers. We met with him. He promised to find us a child. Thomas could picture it. His parents sitting in some church office, holding hands, hoping for a miracle, not knowing or maybe not wanting to know that what they were about to do crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed. 6 months later, Father O'Connor called. He said he had a baby for us. A boy, 6 weeks old, healthy, available immediately. But there was a complication. The birth parents, your birth parents, weren't young unwed mothers looking to place a child for adoption. They were married, they had other children, they were immigrants, undocumented, desperate for money. They wanted to sell their baby. Sell, not place, not give up, sell. Thomas felt bile rise in his throat. He pressed his hand against his mouth, forcing it down, forced himself to keep reading. Father O'Connor was clear. This wasn't a legal adoption. This was a transaction. The Rodriguezes wanted $15,000. In exchange, they'd sign papers saying they were giving up parental rights. We'd take the baby and raise him as our own. No one would ever know. The church would keep the secret. We'd all pretend it was a normal private adoption. A normal private adoption. As if there was anything normal about buying a human being. Thomas stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair. He paced the study, the letter clutched in his fist, his mind racing. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be his story. His parents were good people, respected people. They'd raised him with love and attention and every advantage. They'd taught him right from wrong. They'd been his entire world. But they'd bought him, paid cash for a 6-week-old baby like he was merchandise, like he was a solution to a problem instead of a human being with a family who should have kept him. He returned to the desk and continued reading. He had to know everything, had to understand how his perfect parents had justified something so monstrous. "I know what you're thinking, that we should have walked away, that we should have reported the situation to authorities, that we should have protected you and your biological family from this transaction. You're right. We should have done all those things, but we didn't. We told ourselves that we were saving you, that the Rodriguezes were going to sell you to someone anyway, so it might as well be us, that you'd have a better life with us than with desperate immigrants who saw their baby as a commodity. Rationalizations. The same rationalizations every person used when they did something unconscionable. We were saving him. He'd be better off with us. We gave him opportunities he never would have had. All of it might even be true, but it didn't make the foundation any less rotten. We met them once. Your biological parents, Elena and Marcus Rodriguez. They brought you to the church on a Friday evening. You were so small, Thomas, so perfect, wrapped in a thin blanket, crying softly, completely unaware that your entire life was about to change. Your biological mother held you like she didn't want to let go, but she did let go. She handed you to your mother, to Patricia, and took the envelope of cash I'd brought. She didn't count it, just clutched it to her chest and started crying. Thomas pressed his hand against his chest. His heart was hammering so hard it hurt. He could picture the scene too vividly, a church basement or office, his biological mother, Elena, young and desperate and crying as she handed over her baby for money. His father, Gerald, respectable attorney, handing over cash like he was buying a used car. And him, baby Thomas, too young to understand that he was being sold, too young to know that his entire identity was being erased and replaced with a comfortable lie. Marcus didn't cry. He just signed the papers Father O'Connor put in front of him. His English wasn't good, but he understood what he was doing. He was giving away his son for $15,000. When it was done, he looked at me and said, "You take good care of him. You promise." I promised. And Thomas, I kept that promise. We gave you everything, love, education, opportunity. We never regretted taking you, not for one single day. But did that matter? Did being a good father excuse buying a child in the first place? Thomas didn't know, couldn't process it. His entire moral framework was collapsing. We created a birth certificate. Father O'Connor knew people who could do that. Made it look like you were born to us in Richmond on May 20th, 1986. Your real birth date is sometime in early April. We don't know exactly when. The Rodriguezes either didn't know or didn't tell us. You were approximately 6 weeks old when we got you, so we worked backward from there. His birthday was a lie, even that. Even the day he celebrated every year with cake and presents was fabricated. Thomas was 38 years old and he didn't even know the actual day he'd been born. We gave you the name Thomas Gerald Barrett. Your biological parents had called you Miguel. We changed it, erased that part of you, made you ours completely. I'm not proud of that, I'm not proud of any of this, but I can't undo it. I can only tell you the truth and hope you can somehow forgive us. Miguel. His name had been Miguel Rodriguez. Thomas sat with that information, trying it out in his mind. Miguel. It felt foreign. Wrong. He'd been Thomas for 38 years. Thomas Barrett, attorney, following in his father's footsteps. But before that, for 6 weeks, he'd been Miguel Rodriguez. A different person. A different life, a different family, a family that had sold him. I don't know what happened to Elena and Marcus Rodriguez. After that night, we never saw them again. Father O'Connor said they left Virginia, went somewhere else to start over. Whether they used that $15,000 to build a better life or squandered it, I don't know. I hope they used it well. I hope they didn't have more children just to sell them too, but I honestly don't know. Thomas's throat tightened. More children. He might have siblings, brothers or sisters who'd grown up with the parents who'd sold him, kids who'd been kept while he'd been discarded, or maybe the Rodriguezes had sold them too. Maybe he was just one of several transactions. Maybe he had siblings out there who'd also been purchased by desperate couples willing to pay cash for a baby. The thought made him sick. I'm telling you this now because you deserve to know. Because building your life on lies, even comfortable lies, is wrong. I of all people should understand that. I spent my entire career fighting for truth and justice in courtrooms while living a lie at home. The hypocrisy isn't lost on me. At least Gerald had been self-aware, that was something. Not enough to make this okay, but something. I've left you information. In the safe in my office. The combination is your birthday. The fake one. The one we gave you. Inside you'll find everything I could gather about Elena and Marcus Rodriguez. Not much, I'm afraid. They were undocumented. They lived in the shadows. But I have an old address, a few names of people they might have known. If you want to find them, if you want to understand why they did what they did, I've given you the tools. Thomas looked at the safe built into the wall behind his father's desk. He'd known about it his whole life, but had never known the combination. Never had reason to open it. Now it held the key to his real identity, his real family, his real history. Did he want to open it? Did he want to know more? Whatever you decide, Thomas, I need you to know this. Your mother and I loved you. We love you still. Well, I suppose I'm past tense now, but your mother loves you with everything she has. You were never a transaction to us. You were our son, our miracle, the answer to years of prayer. We raised you as our own because you were our own. The method of bringing you into our family was wrong, but the love was real. Love built on theft, on exploitation, on the desperation of people so poor they saw their baby as currency. Could that love still be real? Could it still be pure? Thomas didn't know, wasn't sure he'd ever know. The letter ended with a final plea. I'm sorry, son. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry. I made choices I can't unmake. I hurt people I'll never be able to apologize to. I built your life on a foundation of lies. All I can do now is give you the truth and hope that somehow, somewhere you can forgive me. If not now, then maybe someday. I love you. I will always love you. Even now, wherever I am. I love you still. Dad. Dad. Gerald had signed it, Dad, because that's what he'd been. Despite everything. Despite the horrifying origin story. Despite the transaction and the lies and the stolen identity. Gerald had been Thomas's father for 38 years, but Miguel Rodriguez had a father too. Marcus Rodriguez, a man who'd sold his son for $15,000, a man who might still be alive somewhere, living with the choice he'd made in 1986. Thomas had two fathers, one who'd bought him, one who'd sold him, and somehow he was supposed to make sense of that, supposed to figure out who he was in light of these revelations. He picked up the receipt again, studied the signatures at the bottom. Elena Rodriguez, Marcus Rodriguez, Gerald Barrett, Patricia Barrett, Father Michael O'Connor as witness. 5 people who'd conspired to erase Miguel and create Thomas. 5 people who'd all believed they were doing the right thing. Or at least, 5 people who'd convinced themselves they were doing the right thing. Thomas looked at the safe, at the answers waiting inside, at the information about Elena and Marcus Rodriguez, about his biological family, about the people who'd created him and then traded him for cash. Did he want to know? Did he want to find them? Did he want to confront them with what they'd done? Or did he want to burn all of this, the letter, the receipt, the information in the safe, and go on being Thomas Barrett, attorney, son of Gerald and Patricia, living the comfortable lie? He didn't know. But he knew he had to decide, because his father had given him a choice, had handed him the truth and said, essentially, do with this what you will. So Thomas had to figure out what his will actually was. If this story has touched you, if you've ever questioned your identity or discovered secrets that changed everything, please like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and send this to someone who needs to know that truth, no matter how painful, is always worth pursuing. Thomas didn't leave his father's study for hours. He sat surrounded by the debris of his shattered identity, reading and rereading the letter, studying the receipt, trying to absorb what he'd learned. Outside, the sun set. The room grew dark. He didn't turn on lights, just sat in shadows that felt appropriate for the darkness of what he'd discovered. His phone buzzed repeatedly. His wife, Lauren, calling. His mother. His sister, Rebecca. No, not his sister. His adopted sister. Everything was different now. Every relationship redefined by this revelation. He finally answered when Lauren called for the 5th time. Thomas? Where are you? I've been worried sick. I'm at Dad's house, in his study. His voice sounded hollow, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Are you okay? You sound strange. Was he okay? What a ridiculous question. I found something. In Dad's pocket watch. A letter. And a receipt. A receipt for what? For me. The words came out flat, emotionless. My parents bought me. From people named Rodriguez. Paid $15,000 in cash. I wasn't adopted, I was purchased. Silence on the other end. Then, what? Thomas, that can't be. I'm looking at the receipt right now. Dated March 1986. 1 male infant, approximately 6 weeks old. That was me. Miguel Rodriguez. That was my name before they erased it and made me Thomas Barrett. Oh my God. Lauren's voice shook. Thomas, I'm coming over. Don't move. Don't do anything. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up before he could argue. Thomas set the phone down and looked at the safe again. He'd been avoiding it, avoiding the next level of truth. But Lauren was coming, and soon his mother would probably come too, and then there'd be questions and emotions and he'd never get answers. He needed answers before he could face anyone. The combination was his birthday, May 20th, 5:20. Thomas turned the dial carefully, listening to the tumblers click. The safe door swung open with a soft creak. Inside was a manila folder thick with papers. Thomas pulled it out and spread the contents across his father's desk. Old photographs, official documents, handwritten notes in his father's meticulous script. Everything Gerald had managed to learn about Eleanor and Marcus Rodriguez in 38 years. There was a photograph of a young couple, probably taken in the early 1980s based on the clothing and the quality of the film. The woman was petite, dark-haired with kind eyes and a sad smile. The man was tall, work-worn, handsome despite obvious exhaustion. They stood in front of a small house, holding a toddler between them. Not Thomas, someone else. A child they'd kept. Elena and Marcus Rodriguez, his biological parents, strangers with his DNA. Looking at them made Thomas feel nothing. They weren't his parents in any emotional sense. They were just people who'd created him and then sold him because they needed money more than they needed another child. But that wasn't fair, was it? Thomas forced himself to think about it objectively. They'd been immigrants, undocumented, living in poverty. They'd already had children, at least one, maybe more. Another baby meant another mouth to feed with money they didn't have. They'd made a choice, a terrible choice, but a choice born of desperation, not evil. Did that make it forgivable? Thomas didn't know. He found an old address, an apartment building in Arlington, Virginia. The note beside it, in his father's handwriting, said, "Last known address, 1986. Landlord confirmed they left in April of that year. No forwarding address." There were other notes, names of people Gerald had tried to track down, former neighbors, co-workers from a restaurant where Elena had worked as a dishwasher, a man who'd employed Marcus doing construction. All dead ends. Either people who'd moved on, or people who claimed not to remember the Rodriguezes. But there was one lead, a woman named Carmen Fuentes. The note said, "Sister of Elena Rodriguez, last known to be living in Baltimore. May have maintained contact with family. A sister, Thomas's aunt. Someone who might know where Eleanor and Marcus had ended up. Someone who might be able to tell him why they'd done what they did." There was an address in Baltimore, no phone number. The note was dated 2 years ago. Thomas's father had been looking for answers right up until his death, had been trying to give Thomas the tools to find his biological family if he chose to. Had Gerald felt guilty all these years? Had the weight of his secret eaten at him? Or had he genuinely believed he'd done the right thing? Thomas looked at his father's photograph on the desk. Gerald Barrett, in his prime, successful and confident, wearing his courtroom face. The man who'd taught Thomas about integrity and honesty while living a massive lie. The man who'd loved him fiercely while knowing the foundation of their relationship was rotten. Could you love someone completely while lying to them every day? Apparently, yes. Gerald had managed it for 38 years. The front door opened downstairs. Lauren's voice. "Thomas, where are you?" "Study," he called back. She appeared in the doorway moments later, slightly breathless from hurrying. Lauren was beautiful even in distress. Dark hair pulled back, her work clothes rumpled, her face etched with concern. They'd been married for 12 years. She knew him better than anyone, could read his moods, his thoughts, his fears. Right now, she looked terrified. "Show me," she said. So Thomas showed her everything. The letter, the receipt, the photographs, the information about Carmen Fuentes. He watched Lauren's face cycle through disbelief, horror, sympathy, and anger. By the time she'd finished reading, she was crying. "Your poor mother," she said. "Patricia, does she know you found this? I haven't told her yet." Thomas hadn't even thought about his mother, about how this would destroy her, about how she'd carried this secret alongside Gerald, lived with it every day, looked at Thomas and known the truth he didn't. "She'll be devastated," Lauren said. "She loved your father. She loves you. This is going to tear her apart." "She participated in it," Thomas said coldly. "She paid cash for a baby. She created a fake birth certificate. She lied to me for 38 years. Why should I protect her from the consequences? Because she's your mother. Because she raised you. Because whatever wrong they did in bringing you into the family, they loved you every day after that." Lauren grabbed his hands. "Thomas, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But your mother is 73 years old. Her husband just died. Are you really going to destroy her by confronting her with this?" "I need answers," Thomas said. "I need to understand why they did it. Why they thought it was okay. You have your father's letter. You have his explanation. That's his version, his rationalization. I need to hear it from her. I need to look her in the eyes and ask her how she justified buying a child. Lauren studied his face. What are you going to do about them? Elena and Marcus Rodriguez? I don't know. Thomas looked at the address in Baltimore. Part of me wants to find them, to ask them why they sold me, to understand what kind of people do that. And the other part? The other part wants to burn all of this and pretend I never found it, go back to being Thomas Barrett and forget Miguel Rodriguez ever existed. Can you do that? Can you unknow this? No, that was the problem. You couldn't unsee truth once it was revealed. You couldn't go back to comfortable ignorance once reality had forced its way in. Thomas was stuck now, trapped between two identities, two families, two completely different versions of his origin story. I'm going to Baltimore, he decided suddenly. I'm going to find Carmen Fuentes. I'm going to ask her about Elena and Marcus. And then I'm going to decide whether I want to find them. When? Tomorrow. I'll call in sick to work. Drive up in the morning. If she's still at that address, I'll talk to her. If not, he shrugged, then maybe that's the universe telling me to let it go. I'm coming with you, Lauren said firmly. You don't have to. I'm coming with you. You're not doing this alone. They drove to Baltimore the next morning, Lauren at the wheel while Thomas stared out the window, lost in thought. The address his father had left was in a working-class neighborhood, row houses with small front yards, cars parked bumper to bumper along narrow streets, the kind of place where people worked hard and kept to themselves. Carmen Fuentes' house was in the middle of the block, neat but worn. The porch steps needed repair, the paint was fading, but flowers bloomed in window boxes, and the small yard was carefully maintained. Someone cared about this house. Someone was trying. Thomas sat in the car for a full 5 minutes before he could make himself move. This was it, the point of no return. If he knocked on that door, if he introduced himself, everything would change. There'd be no going back to ignorance. You ready? Lauren asked gently. No, but I'm doing it anyway. They walked to the door together. Thomas knocked, waited, heard movement inside. Then the door opened, revealing a woman in her 60s, short, slightly overweight, with graying black hair and Elena's kind eyes. His aunt, his biological aunt. Yes. She looked at them with polite confusion. Can I help you? Are you Carmen Fuentes? Yes. My name is Thomas Barrett. But I think I used to be Miguel Rodriguez, Elena and Marcus's son, the baby they gave away in 1986. Carmen's face went white. She gripped the doorframe. Dios mío, she whispered. Miguel. You're Miguel. Can we talk? Please. I need to understand what happened. Carmen looked behind her into the house, then back at Thomas and Lauren. Come in. Come in. I never thought I'd see you again. Never thought you'd find us. The house was small but immaculate. Religious icons covered the walls, crucifixes and images of Mary and saints Thomas didn't recognize. Family photographs crowded every surface. Carmen led them to a worn sofa and sat across from them, her hands trembling. How did you find me? She asked. My adoptive father, left me information. He'd been looking for Elena and Marcus. He found your address. He wanted me to have the choice to find them if I wanted to. Your adoptive father. Carmen said the words carefully. He was good to you? You had a good life? Yes, very good. He and my mother raised me well, gave me every advantage. I went to college, law school. I'm an attorney now, like he was. Carmen's eyes filled with tears. Elena would be so happy to hear that. She prayed for you every day, every single day for 38 years. Prayed you were safe and loved and successful. Prayed you'd forgive her someday. The mention of forgiveness made Thomas's chest tight. Is she alive? Elena? Carmen nodded. Yes. She lives in North Carolina now. She and Marcus. They have a small restaurant. They're doing okay. Better than they were. They had other children. It wasn't a question. Thomas had seen the photo. 4. 2 before you, 2 after. You were their third child. The middle one. Carmen looked down at her hands. They were desperate, Miguel. Thomas. You have to understand. They were desperate. Tell me. Thomas leaned forward. Tell me everything. I need to know why they did it. So Carmen told him. And the story she told was both worse and better than Thomas had imagined. Eleanor and Marcus had come to the United States in 1983, illegally, paying a coyote to smuggle them across the Mexican border. They'd been young, Elena was 22. Marcus was 24, with two small children and dreams of a better life. In Mexico, there'd been no work, no future, just poverty that ground you down generation after generation. In America, they'd found work. Marcus in construction, Elena cleaning houses. It was hard work, cash under the table, no benefits or security, but it was work. They'd been able to rent a small apartment, feed their kids, start saving. Then Elena got pregnant again, with Thomas Miguel. They panicked, Carmen said. Another baby meant more money they didn't have, more risk. If Elena couldn't work because of the pregnancy, they'd lose income. If something went wrong, they couldn't go to a hospital without risking deportation. They were trapped, so they decided to sell the baby. Thomas couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. No, Carmen shook her head firmly. They decided to place you for adoption. They went to a church, St. Mary's. Talked to a priest, Father O'Connor. He said he could help find a good family, a wealthy family who wanted a child. He said you'd have opportunities Elena and Marcus could never give you. And then he suggested they should be paid for it. Carmen looked uncomfortable. He said most adoptions involved money, for medical expenses, for lost wages. He made it sound normal, professional, like they weren't selling their baby. They were being compensated for their sacrifice. Classic manipulation. Take desperate people and convince them that the unconscionable thing you're asking them to do is actually noble. That's what Father O'Connor had done. That's how he'd gotten Elena and Marcus to agree to sell their son. $15,000, Thomas said. That's what my parents paid. Yes, it was more money than Elena and Marcus had ever seen. They thought it would change their lives, that they could use it to get legal status somehow, to start over properly, to give their other children a better future. Did it work? Did the money help? Carmen's face crumpled. No. They spent some of it on immigration lawyers who took their money and did nothing. Some of it went to pay off debts. Some of it they sent back to family in Mexico. Within a year it was gone and they were exactly where they'd been before, except now they had guilt instead of a son. Thomas felt something crack inside him. They'd sold him for nothing, for money that disappeared, for a better life that never materialized. He'd been traded away for a dream that turned out to be a lie. Elena had a breakdown, Carmen continued, about 6 months after they gave you up. She couldn't function, couldn't work, just cried all the time. Marcus had to take her to a clinic. They gave her medicine, but it didn't help much. She was haunted by what she'd done, but not haunted enough to try to get me back. How could they? Carmen asked. They'd signed papers saying they gave up parental rights. They didn't know your new name or where you'd gone. Father O'Connor said the adoption was sealed, final. There was no getting you back, even if they'd tried. Thomas thought about that, about Eleanor crying in some tiny apartment, mourning the baby she'd sold, about Marcus working construction while carrying the guilt of what they'd done, about two people who'd made a terrible choice and then had to live with it forever. Did it make what they did forgivable? No, but it made them human, flawed and desperate and broken, but human. Thomas sat in Carmen's living room, processing. Around him, family photographs documented lives he'd never been part of. Children who looked like him, his siblings, strangers with his DNA, growing up, graduating, getting married, having children of their own. All of it happening while Thomas lived a completely different life in Virginia. Tell me about them, he said. My brothers and sisters. Carmen's face softened. Your oldest brother is Carlos. He's 41 now. He's a mechanic. Married with 3 kids. Good man. Works hard like his father. She pointed to a photograph of a stocky man with Thomas's nose and jawline. He doesn't remember you. He was only 3 when you were born. And the others? Rosa is 39. She's a nurse. She works at a hospital in Raleigh. She's close to your parents, visits them every week. Carmen showed him a picture of a pretty woman in scrubs, smiling at the camera. Thomas's sister, his full biological sister, looking nothing like him and everything like him at the same time. Then there's Diego. He's 35. He's the wild one, has had trouble with the law, in and out of jail. Your parents worry about him constantly. A mugshot, essentially. A young man who looked angry and lost. Another brother Thomas would never know. And the youngest is Anna. She's 33. She teaches elementary school. Has a daughter of her own. She's smart, Miguel, really smart. She went to college on scholarship, first in the family to graduate. 4 siblings. Thomas had grown up as an only child. No, that wasn't right either. He'd had a sister, Rebecca, but she was adopted too, though legally, properly, through an agency when Thomas was 5 years old. So he'd had a sister, just not these siblings, not his blood. Do they know about me? Thomas asked. Carmen hesitated. Carlos and Rosa know. Your parents told them when they were older. Told them about the baby they'd given up before they came to America. She caught herself. I mean, that's what Elena and Marcus told them. They lied about the circumstances, said you'd been placed for adoption in Mexico with a good family. They never admitted they'd sold you. So they lied to their other children too. Thomas laughed bitterly. Seems like lying runs in both my families. They were ashamed, Carmen said. They've carried that shame every day. It's eaten them alive. Elena lights candles for you at church, prays for your soul. Marcus, he doesn't talk about it, but I've seen him looking at baby pictures, at the one photo they have of you, just staring at it like he's trying to memorize what they gave away. Thomas felt something twist in his chest. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition. These people, Elena and Marcus, had lived with their terrible choice for 38 years, just like Gerald and Patricia had. All 4 of his parents had been trapped in a conspiracy of silence, bound together by a transaction that haunted everyone involved. I want to meet them, Thomas said suddenly. Elena and Marcus. I want to see them face to face. Carmen looked alarmed. Miguel, Thomas, I don't know if that's a good idea. They're old now. Elena has a bad heart. The shock could... They sold me. Thomas's voice was hard. They don't get to be protected from the consequences. They made a choice 38 years ago. Now they get to face that choice. Lauren put her hand on Thomas's arm. Maybe Carmen could contact them first. Warn them, give them time to prepare. No. Thomas stood up. No warning. No time to prepare a story or rationalize what they did. I'm going to North Carolina. I'm going to their restaurant. And I'm going to walk in and introduce myself. They can deal with the shock the same way I had to. It wasn't fair. Thomas knew it wasn't fair. But nothing about this situation was fair. He'd been sold as a baby. His identity had been erased. He'd lived 38 years inside a lie. He was entitled to some unfairness in return. Carmen gave him the address, a small Mexican restaurant in a town outside Raleigh. Please, she said as they were leaving, please don't be too hard on them. They've suffered. They really have. So have I, Thomas said. I just didn't know it until now. The drive to North Carolina took 6 hours. Thomas and Lauren stopped for lunch, but Thomas couldn't eat. His stomach was twisted in knots. His mind raced with scenarios. What would he say? How would they react? Would they deny it, defend it, apologize? Would seeing them make things better or worse? They arrived in the small North Carolina town at dusk. The restaurant was easy to find. Rosa's Kitchen, painted in bright colors, with a neon sign advertising authentic Mexican food. Cars filled the parking lot. Friday night, busy dinner rush. Thomas almost turned around, almost decided to come back another time, when it was less crowded. But that would be cowardice, and Thomas Barrett had been raised by Gerald Barrett to face difficult things head-on. That was one lesson that transcended biological family. Courage was courage, no matter who taught it. They parked and sat in the car. Lauren squeezed his hand. You sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Inside, the restaurant was warm and noisy. Families filled booths. The smell of spices and grilled meat filled the air. A young woman greeted them. His sister Anna, Thomas realized with a start. He had her eyes. She had his mouth. They were strangers and siblings simultaneously. Table for 2? Anna asked in unaccented English. Born here, probably. American in every way her parents weren't. Actually, Thomas said, his voice shaking slightly, I'm looking for Elena and Marcus Rodriguez. Are they here? Anna's smile dimmed slightly. They're the owners. They're probably in the kitchen. Is there a problem? No problem. I need to speak with them. It's personal. Anna looked uncertain but nodded. Let me get them. One moment. She disappeared into the kitchen. Thomas heard voices speaking rapid Spanish. Then silence. Then footsteps. Elena Rodriguez emerged from the kitchen first. She was older than her photograph, obviously. 63 now, Thomas calculated, short and round, with grey streaking her black hair. She wore an apron over her clothes. Her hands were covered in flour. She looked like someone's grandmother, kind, warm, non-threatening. She looked at Thomas and froze. Her hand flew to her mouth. The color drained from her face. "Miguel," she whispered. "Oh my God, Miguel." Marcus appeared behind her, tall still but bent with age and hard work. His hair was completely grey. Deep lines scored his face. He looked at Thomas and his eyes filled with tears. "Dios mío," he said. Our son came back." The revelation hit Thomas then, the first of two that would reshape everything. They recognized him instantly. After 38 years, after seeing him only once as a 6-week-old baby, they knew him on sight. Which meant they'd been looking for him in every face, searching for him everywhere they went. Never forgetting, never moving on. They'd sold him, but they'd also mourned him every day since. Thomas opened his mouth to speak, to demand answers, to rage at them for what they'd done, but the words wouldn't come. He just stood there in the restaurant filled with strangers, staring at the biological parents who'd traded him for cash, unable to reconcile the monsters he'd expected with the broken people crying in front of him. "Can we talk?" he finally managed. "Somewhere private?" They went to the small office in the back of the restaurant. Marcus asked Anna to handle the front. The young woman looked confused but nodded, glancing at Thomas with curiosity she didn't voice. She'd figure it out eventually. They all would. The secret was about to explode into the open. The office was cramped, cluttered with papers and supplies. Elena and Marcus sat close together on a small sofa, holding hands like they needed the physical connection to get through this. Thomas and Lauren took the only chairs. No one spoke for a long moment. The tension was suffocating. "How did you find us?" Marcus finally asked. His English was better than Thomas expected, accented but clear. "My adoptive father left me information about the transaction, about Carmen, about you." Thomas pulled the receipt from his pocket, the one that had destroyed his world. "He died 3 weeks ago. I found this in his pocket watch." He handed it to Eleanor. She took it with trembling fingers and began to cry the moment she saw it. Not soft tears, huge, racking sobs that shook her whole body. Marcus wrapped his arm around her, his own face wet with tears. "We're sorry," Marcus said. "We're so sorry. There's no excuse for what we did, no justification. We were wrong. We've known we were wrong for 38 years. Then why did you do it?" Thomas's voice cracked. "How could you sell your baby? How could you look at me and decide I was worth $15,000? "We were desperate," Elena said through her tears. "We were so desperate. We had 2 babies already, no money, no papers, no way to get medical care. When I got pregnant with you, I was terrified. Terrified we couldn't feed you. Terrified something would go wrong and we'd be deported. Terrified of everything. So you went to a priest who told you that selling me was actually noble, that you were giving me a better life." "Yes," Marcus nodded. "Father O'Connor made it sound right. Said you'd go to a wealthy family, have opportunities, be safe, everything we couldn't give you. And the money, he said it was normal, that adoptions cost money. That we should be compensated for our sacrifice." Marcus looked directly at Thomas. "We believed him, we wanted to believe him, because the money seemed like it could save us, could change everything." "Did it?" Thomas already knew the answer, but wanted to hear them say it. "No." Eleanor wiped her eyes. "The money was gone in a year, wasted on lawyers who lied, on bills, on nothing that mattered. And we were left with nothing except the memory of what we'd done." "And 3 other children," Thomas said. "You kept them, you raised them, so clearly you figured out how to manage without selling more babies." Elena flinched like he'd struck her. "You're right. We should have fought harder, should have found a way. But by the time we realized our mistake, you were already gone. The papers were signed. Father O'Connor said we couldn't get you back, even if we tried. Did you try?" Silence. Then Marcus said quietly, "No, we didn't try. We were scared. Scared we'd be arrested. Scared we'd be deported. Scared we'd lose our other children, so we just lived with it. Lived with the guilt and the shame and the knowledge that somewhere our son was growing up with strangers." Thomas stood up abruptly. The office was too small, too hot. He needed air, needed space, needed to not be in this room with these people who'd created him and then traded him away. But Lauren caught his arm. "Thomas, wait, listen to them. I've heard enough." "No." Eleanor stood too, moving toward him. Please listen. I need you to understand, I loved you from the moment I knew I was pregnant. I loved you. When you were born, I held you and I loved you. For 6 weeks, I fed you and changed you and sang to you and loved you, and then I gave you away because I thought that was love too. I thought loving you meant giving you a better life than I could provide. You gave me away for money, Thomas said coldly. Yes, and I've regretted it every single day since. Every birthday you had that I missed, every Christmas, every milestone. I pictured you growing up, wondered what you looked like, what kind of person you were becoming. I prayed you were happy, that your adoptive parents were good to you, that you never knew the truth because the truth would hurt you. Well, congratulations. The truth did hurt me. It destroyed everything I thought I knew about myself. I know. Eleanor's voice broke. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If I could go back, if I could undo it, I would. I'd keep you. I'd find a way to make it work. But I can't. I can only tell you that giving you away broke my heart, that I've carried you with me every day, that you're as much my son now as you were 38 years ago. The second devastating revelation crashed over Thomas then. She meant it. Every word. Elena Rodriguez had sold her baby, but she'd also never stopped being his mother. She'd mourned him, searched for him in crowds, prayed for him every day. The transaction had been real, but so had her love. Both things were true simultaneously. How was he supposed to reconcile that? How was he supposed to hate someone who destroyed his life but also clearly loved him? I had a good life, Thomas said finally. My adoptive parents, Gerald and Patricia Barrett, they gave me everything. Education, opportunities, love. They were good parents. Better than... He stopped himself. They raised me well. I'm glad. Eleanor smiled through her tears. That's all I ever wanted. For you to be okay. To be loved. But they lied to me too. They created a fake identity. Made me Thomas instead of Miguel. Told me I was theirs when I wasn't. So I've had two sets of parents and both of them built my life on lies. Marcus stood and moved toward Thomas slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. You're right. Everyone failed you. We failed you by giving you away. Your adoptive parents failed you by not telling you the truth. You deserved better than what any of us gave you. So what now? Thomas asked. You've apologized. I've heard your story. What am I supposed to do with all this? Whatever you want, Marcus said. If you want to walk out and never see us again, we'll understand. If you want to press charges, I don't know if you can after so long, but if you can, we won't fight it. If you want to meet your brothers and sisters, we'll arrange it. Whatever you need. It's your choice now. Your choice. That was the thing, wasn't it? For 38 years, everyone else had made choices about Thomas's life. Elena and Marcus had chosen to sell him. Gerald and Patricia had chosen to buy him. Father O'Connor had chosen to facilitate the transaction. Everyone had had agency except Thomas himself. Now, finally, he got to choose who he was, who his family was, how he moved forward from this revelation. Thomas looked at Elena and Marcus, at these people who'd created him and then traded him, who'd lived with guilt and shame for decades, who looked old and tired and broken, who clearly loved him despite, or maybe because of, what they'd done. He thought about Gerald Barrett, who'd raised him and loved him and taught him to be a good man despite the foundation of lies, who'd left him the truth because he believed Thomas deserved it, even if it destroyed everything. Two fathers, two mothers, all flawed, all human, all trying their best and failing in spectacular ways. I don't forgive you, Thomas said. I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did was wrong. Unforgivable, probably. Elena nodded, accepting the judgment. But, Thomas continued, I want to understand. I want to know my siblings. I want to understand where I came from, who I could have been. I want... His voice broke. I want to know if you really loved me, or if I was just a commodity to you. We loved you, Elena said with absolute certainty. We love you still. We've loved you every day you've been gone. We'll love you until we die. If this story moved you, if you understand that family and identity are more complicated than blood or law, please share it, like this video. Comment with your thoughts about forgiveness, identity, and the impossible choices desperate people make. Because sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that force us to see everyone, even those who hurt us, as human. Thomas stayed in North Carolina for 3 days, long enough to meet his siblings, long enough to hear their stories, long enough to begin piecing together the life he could have had. Carlos, the oldest, was welcoming but wary. He remembered fragments of a baby brother, remembered his mother crying after the baby disappeared. He'd believed the lie about adoption. Now learning the truth, he didn't know how to feel. "They're still our parents," he said to Thomas over beer in his garage. "They made a mistake, a huge mistake, but they're still our parents." Rosa was softer. She hugged Thomas immediately, crying. "I always felt like someone was missing," she said. "Like we were incomplete. Now I know why." She'd become a nurse to help people, she said, to make up for something she couldn't name. Now she understood. She was atoning for her parents' sin. Diego wasn't there, still in jail, this time for drug possession. Another casualty of poverty and limited options. Thomas wondered if things would have been different if Elena and Marcus had kept that $15,000. If it had actually changed their lives the way they'd hoped. Probably not. Money didn't fix everything, but it might have fixed something. Anna was the revelation. Smart and ambitious and completely American. She'd escaped the cycle of poverty through education. She had opinions about immigration reform and workers' rights. She interrogated Thomas about his life, his career, his politics. She wanted to know if privilege had made him conservative, if growing up wealthy had disconnected him from reality. "I teach inner-city kids," she told him. "Poor kids, immigrant kids, kids whose parents are desperate just like ours were. And I see how the system fails them, how they're offered terrible choices and judged when they make terrible decisions. So before you judge Mum and Dad too harshly, remember, they were victims too, of a system that treats immigrants like criminals, that offers no support to struggling families, that makes people so desperate they do unconscionable things." She wasn't wrong. Thomas had spent his career as a corporate attorney. He'd never thought much about immigration policy or poverty. He'd lived in the comfortable bubble his purchased identity provided. Now meeting his biological family, seeing how they lived, he understood what he'd been protected from. The struggle, the desperation, the limited options that made selling a baby seem like a reasonable choice. Understanding didn't mean forgiving, but it meant seeing them as human, as people who'd done a terrible thing for understandable reasons. On the third day, Elena asked Thomas if he'd come to their house. "I want to show you something," she said. The house was small but immaculate. The house that $15,000 couldn't buy. The house they'd worked decades to afford. Elena led Thomas to a small bedroom in the back. Inside was a shrine. Not religious, though there were candles. A shrine to Miguel, to the baby they'd given away. There was the one photograph they had of Thomas as an infant. Carmen had taken it the week before the transaction. Baby Miguel in a yellow onesie, sleeping in Elena's arms, blown up and framed and hung on the wall. Beneath it was a shelf with items that had belonged to him. The blanket he'd been wrapped in, a tiny bracelet from the hospital where he was born, a rattle, a baptism certificate, and beside those items were other things. Birthday cards, one for every year. Never sent, never opened, just written and saved. "Happy first birthday, Miguel. I hope you're walking now. I hope you're happy. Happy 10th birthday, Miguel. I wonder if you play sports, if you have friends, if you know you're loved." 38 cards, one for every birthday. Every year Elena had written to the son who'd never read her words. Thomas picked up the most recent one, his 38th birthday, 4 months ago. "Happy birthday, Miguel. I wonder if you're married, if you have children, if you've lived the life we hoped you'd have. I wonder if you think of us, if you wonder where you came from. I wonder if you'll ever forgive us. I love you. I will always love you. Mom, Mom." She'd signed them all, Mom. Even though she'd sold him, even though she'd given up the right to that title, she'd claimed it anyway, had held onto it for 38 years. Thomas sat down on the small bed. The weight of everything finally hit him. The complexity, the tragedy, the fact that everyone involved had been trying to do what was right and had all failed spectacularly. Gerald and Patricia had wanted a child. Elena and Marcus had wanted security. Father O'Connor had wanted to help. Everyone had had good intentions. Everyone had made terrible choices. And Thomas had paid the price, but he'd also benefited. That was the uncomfortable truth. He'd gotten education and opportunity. He'd become an attorney. He'd had a comfortable life. He'd been loved. If Elena and Marcus had kept him, he might have struggled, might have ended up like Diego, trapped in cycles of poverty and crime, might never have had the chances he'd had. Was that worth being sold? Was success worth the stolen identity? He didn't know, might never know. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Elena said from the doorway. "I know I don't deserve that, but I needed you to know. You were never forgotten. You were loved every single day, every birthday, every Christmas, every moment. You were always our son. Even when you weren't with us, you were ours. Thomas looked at the shrine, at the evidence of 38 years of mourning, at the love that had persisted despite, or maybe because of, the terrible thing she'd done. I need time, he said finally, to process all this, to figure out who I am now that I know the truth, to decide what comes next. Take all the time you need, Elena said. We'll be here. We've waited 38 years. We can wait longer. Thomas returned to Virginia changed. Not better, not worse, just different. He carried two histories now, two families, two identities that had to somehow coexist. He visited his mother, Patricia Barrett, showed her the letter, watched her break down, apologizing through tears for lying, for hiding the truth, for buying him like property. He forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because holding on to anger would destroy him. She'd loved him, raised him, been a good mother despite the foundation of lies. That had to count for something. He met with Father O'Connor's successor at St. Mary's. The old priest was dead, had died 5 years ago. But the church had records, other transactions, other babies sold to desperate couples, a whole underground economy of human trafficking masquerading as adoption. The new priest was horrified, promised to report it, promised to make sure it never happened again. Too late for Thomas, too late for the other babies who'd been sold, but maybe not too late for future children. Thomas told his wife everything, his friends, his colleagues, his adopted sister Rebecca, who cried and hugged him and said, "You're still my brother, nothing changes that." He put his story on the public record, not for revenge, for truth, for all the Miguel Rodriguezes out there who deserve to know their real stories. And slowly, painfully, he began building relationships with his biological family, coffee with Rosa, phone calls with Carlos, cautious conversations with Elena and Marcus. It wasn't easy, it wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. Finally, after 38 years of lies, it was honest. 6 months after finding the letter, Thomas stood in a cemetery looking at Gerald Barrett's grave. He'd come to say things he'd been too angry to say at the funeral. "You were my father," he said to the stone. "Not biologically, but in every way that mattered. You raised me, you loved me, you taught me to be a good man. The fact that you bought me doesn't erase that. The lies don't erase the love." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "I'm angry at you. I'll probably always be angry about the lies, but I'm also grateful. You gave me a life I never would have had. You gave me opportunities. You made me who I am. So thank you. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I can't be just Thomas Barrett anymore. I have to be Miguel too. I have to carry both identities, but I'll try to honor both. To be the son you raised and the son they lost. To be worthy of all of it." He placed flowers on the grave and walked away. Not closure exactly, but acceptance. The understanding that life was complicated, that people were flawed, that love and betrayal could coexist, that you could be hurt by someone and still honor their memory, that you could be sold as a baby and still have been loved. Thomas's phone buzzed. A text from Elena. "Rosa is making tamales this weekend. She wants you to come, to teach you our recipes, your recipes. Will you come?" Thomas thought about it. About the family that had sold him and the family that had bought him. About the life he'd lived and the life he could have lived. About identity and belonging and what it meant to be someone's son. He typed back, "Yes, I'll be there." Because in the end, family wasn't about money or transactions or even blood. It was about choice, about showing up, about trying to build something real from broken foundations. Thomas had 2 families now, 4 parents, 2 dead, 2 living. Siblings on both sides, histories that intersected and diverged. It was messy and complicated, and probably would never feel completely resolved, but it was his, all of it, the good and the bad, the love and the betrayal, the truth and the lies. He was Thomas Barrett and Miguel Rodriguez, purchased and loved, sold and mourned, lost and found. He was all of it, and somehow, impossibly, that was okay. He drove toward North Carolina, toward a family dinner with people who shared his DNA and his tragic history, toward tamales and stories and the slow, painful work of building relationships from ruins. It wasn't the life he'd imagined, but it was real. Finally, after 38 years of comfortable fiction, it was real, and that made it worth everything.